Mr Chairman.
Ian McIndoe. No, Tim McIndoe, the old cricketer.
I move that the question be now put.
Stuart Nash.
Mr Chair, there's just a couple of things that I would like to talk about, and certainly a couple of clauses. One is clause 57, and Mr Chair, this relates to an amendment of the Child Support Act 2013. And this is quite important because what it does is, obviously 2013 legislation is rather new, so to be amending it now is, anyway, not ideal. But what it says is that we replace a new section with this, and this allows the Commissioner, Mr Chair, to determine when he or she would write off penalties. And 57(1)(b) says the Commissioner is satisfied, this is when the ability to write off or not collect penalties. The Commissioner is satisfied that recovery of those penalties would do either or both of the following. And first of all, place a liable person in serious hardship. And the second one is involve an inefficient use of the Commissioner's resource. Now, first of all, Mr Chair, let's have a look at the definition of serious hardship, because it is defined in the 1991 Act, the Child Support Act. And this is quite important because there are a number of, and as MPs, we will have dealt with constituents who are paying child support who believe that it is too high because of serious hardship. That is actually defined by the Act as, and I quote, the liable person's inability to meet the minimum living expenses according to normal community standards. And I wonder, Mr Chair, if minimum living expenses according to normal community standards has actually changed between 1991, when this Act was, this piece of legislation came forth, and 2015 we're dealing today. Another part is the cost of medical treatment for an illness or injury of the liable person or the liable person's dependent. So what we're saying here, Mr Chair, is that the Commissioner may write off penalties if in fact the liable person has an illness, or their wife or husband or partner has an illness that is incurring significant expense, which I think is very fair. Or the other one is a serious illness suffered by the liable person or liable person's dependent, or, and this is an interesting one, Mr Chair, because this debate has been in the news recently. So this is defined as serious hardship under the Child Support Act 1991, which is still relevant to the legislation we're talking about today. The cost of education for the liable person's dependent. So if someone is having difficulty meeting the cost of their dependent, then they are judged as being under serious hardship. And I wonder, because we've heard about this recently, a case of New Plymouth Boys High going very hard trying to collect donations from parents. And I wonder, Mr Chair, if in fact the donation or the inability to meet the cost of a donation to a school, and I use donation in the word, in a very wide brief, is actually classed as serious hardship. The other thing, of course, is that what isn't included in serious hardship is the person's ability to pay tax or financial support, or if they become bankrupt, for example, or if the liable person or liable person's dependent social activities or entertainment may be limited, which sounds pretty fair. There is no way you should be able to, or not you, Mr Chair, that a taxpayer or a liable person should be able to claim hardship because they haven't got enough money to go to the pub 3 nights a week. But there are certain circumstances. But the other one, and this is where I wouldn't mind the Minister just perhaps providing a comment, this is where, as mentioned, the Commissioner is satisfied recovery of penalties would be harmful. That would involve the inefficient use of the Commissioner's resource. Now, we have heard, Mr Chair, that 97% of parents under the IRD scheme at some point in time end up coming under the penalty regime because they've missed a payment here or whatever. Now, I just wonder what that limit is. Is it $200? Is it $2,000? How much money does the IRD spend in collecting penalties? Or how, for every dollar it collects, how much money does it spend? And so where is that point? If they're after $100,000, do they say we're going to go hard? Where if it's $20 or $200, do they decide to pull back? But the corollary to that, Mr Chair, is, and I talked about this case earlier, is if a liable parent owes $100,000, and this isn't uncommon, it's a lot more common than we would think, would the IRD say, no, there is no point in going after this person because the only outcome is to send this person into bankruptcy? So I wonder what the definition of inefficient use of the Commissioner's resources is. The other clause I'd like to talk about, Mr. Chair, is clause 23 of this Act, and it repeals section 45 of the 1991 Act. And what section 45 did is it related to, and I actually thought it wasn't a bad idea, Mr. Chair.
Jonathan Young.
I move the question be now put.
I'm tempted, but this is an important part, an important bill.